Michigan's fall camp has been underway. For now, we're in our third day of that. Obviously, information not exactly going to flow out because you know how Michigan rolls. But with everything we kind of know and have known from spring forward, with things we learned through Big Ten Media Days, we got you. We're going to go through every position group, and we're going to discuss who's contending for the battle, who's going to start, and who's going to be a reserve. Let's get into all of that here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And to some, this might feel like a rehash because we've been talking about who's going to be playing, who's going to see bigger minutes, all that kind of stuff, going, show by show since the national championship, essentially. But I went on Wolverines Wire. I put together a list kind of every position group, what's to be expected, who's going to, in my estimation, be the starters, who's going to be the reserves, going beyond just kind of the traditional depth chart, right? Looking at the breadth of the scholarship players or the walk-ons who are likely to participate this year. So let's start off on offense. We'll do probably most of the offense in segment 1. We'll do the defense in segment 2, and we'll continue that into segment 3 because we've got a lot of ground to cover. So obviously the most important position battle that you're going to see is at the top of everything. That's the quarterback battle. You've got 5 contenders there. You got Jack Tuttle, Alex Orji, Davis Warren, Jaden Denegal, and Jaden Davis. I've kind of changed my tune a little bit on all of the Alex Orji of it all, and that's not because I don't love Alex Orji. I think that he's the one who scintillates me the most. He's the one that I look at and say I am enamored with his skill set. But I think there's going to have to be some honing, especially because the schedule is not very permitting to Michigan being able to roll the dice as much as it may have been able to in previous years, right? When we last saw a quarterback battle was the beginning of 2022, Michigan was able to roll the dice between Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy saying, oh, hey, week 1, we're going to start one, week 2, we're going to start the other. That's because the schedule allowed for that. This year, it doesn't really allow that to happen because not only do you have Texas in week 2, but the non-conference opponents opposite Texas on the outside there, sandwiching with Fresno State as well as Arkansas State. Those are difficult non-conference opponents, right? So I think that Michigan, with those 5, they're going to end up looking towards Jack Tuttle because we've heard a lot. We've heard this said by Sharon Moore, said at Big Ten Media Days. It's something I relayed to you back in April when I had heard the same thing uttered, which is, hey, Jack Tuttle, he's a lot better than people think. Unfortunately, he's had to wait behind Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy, guys that went in the first round of the 2024 NFL draft. They end up going number 9 and number 10, played against each other in the national championship game. So I think that what that tells me is that you're going to end up seeing Tuttle end up being that first guy come in. And then could Alex Orji, because Shromore also said there's going to be packages for him. There's going to be, they're going to find ways to get the ball in his hands. That leads me to believe that Tuttle will end up being the first guy out there. And then they're going to end up working in Orji. And by season's end, he could end up being the starter. So give me Tuttle to start and Orji to finish. That's kind of where I'm at because I think his upside, his ceiling is just so much higher. And they're going to try to turn him into a Jalen Milroe type. We all know he has that skill set. I'm excited to see what he's able to do. But I think that he can open up the offense in a way that Jack Tuttle can't. But that said, Michigan did make a college football playoff and beat Ohio State with Cade McNamara. I think Jack Tuttle is probably at least equitable to Cade McNamara. All right, so the next is running back. We know who the starter and the backup is, right? It's Donovan Edwards and Kalel Mullings. I would not be surprised if you see kind of some equal shares as far as the running, the carries that they have. That would not surprise me in the least. But we don't really necessarily know who number 3 is. Lots of guys who are kind of battling for that spot. Tavier Dunlap got a lot of mentions this spring. First name, I believe, out of Tony Alford's mouth as a guy who's really been impressive. Then you look at Benjamin Hall, who would be my kind of favorite there. And Cole Cabana, who's had some health issues. But I think you could use Cole Cabana kind of in a similar fashion to Donovan Edwards. Like, you could split him out wide as a receiver. You can, try to get him in space and do all kinds of different things. And then you've got the freshman Jordan Marshall and Micah Capana. Don't be surprised if you see a guy like Henry Donahue end up making his way in, right? Because Michigan is a program that does not shy away from walk-ons, right? Much to the chagrin of a lot of people, but then you see True Wilson, and he wasn't bad, right? Especially as a running back. We've seen Jordan Kovacs come through the program. Kovacs, as Matt Millen used to call him. He used to always talk about Kovacs. Michigan's had some pretty good luck with some walk-ons throughout the years. Caden Colasar being a little bit more recent. Maybe didn't necessarily show you a ton when he played on defense, but special teams, he was an absolute monster. Best special teams player Michigan had. So I think it really comes down to that rotation. Who's going to be the third guy? I'd say it's going to be Ben Hall. And then I think you'll still see some of the other guys situationally roll in. Wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Marshall really kind of cracks that rotation as well. So that is the running back room. Tight end, I think that's where we'll finish in segment 1. We'll do the rest of the offense in segment 2. We already obviously know who the main starter is. It's Colston Loveland. He's the best tight end in the country now that Brock Bowers has gone from Georgia. And then you've got 2 other kind of co-starters. You've got Max Bredesen if you're going for a fullback / H-back. He could also line up wide, right? Like, we've seen that occasionally, kind of rarely, but occasionally. Marlon Klein will be taking over more of that A.J. Barner role. And listen, he's been talked about as being the most athletic and the fastest of all the tight ends, even better than Colston in a lot of areas. So it'll be intriguing. But so you already kind of know what that is. And then unfortunately, because they don't really like sit there and say, let's go to tight end 5, 6, 7, whatever. I didn't even include 4, but I would imagine you're not going to see a ton of Deacon Tonielli and Zach Marshall. Maybe you'll see them a little bit. And then even though both early enrolled Hogan Hansen and Brady Prescorn, unless they end up really coming on strong the same way Colston Loveland did his freshman year, it's hard for me to imagine that we'll see them. The last couple of years, it seemed like, aside from Colston, you're really only seeing really those veteran senior type of tight ends before anything. But that's the room. It's pretty obvious who the star is of the show. Michigan has a lot of positions like that, but this is one where it's okay. You know who's going to be the main producers most likely, and anything beyond that would be a surprise. All right, we're going to get to the rest of the offense. We're including the offensive line, wide receiver, and the most. We'll probably save for segment 3 the most absolute loaded position group that Michigan has. We'll get to all of that here in just a moment. But before we do, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. I cannot talk today. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because remember, with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. I'll tell you what, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It took me all day to be able to. It's 7:39 in the PM at the moment for me. Don't know what time you'll watch or listen to this. It's taken me to this point to have the energy. And apparently I'm coughing too, but Because last night I had the grand fortune of going to Summer Worship Nights, Brandon Lake, Phil Wickham. Sarah and I missed Holvey as the opener because for some reason they start concerts on time now. Like if it says 7, like it starts at 7. We showed up at like 7:18, and by the time we got to our seats, Holvey was gone. He was done. It's like I think we've been to like 5 or 6, maybe 7 concerts. And we've showed up on time, I think, for 1. But otherwise, we've missed the opener and all of them. Now, when I was younger, that wasn't the case. But it's funny, like, I got plenty of sleep. But this is, I think, just the excitement of it all. I feel like it was when I was in high school. I remember going and seeing Kiss in 1996 and having to go to school the next day. A couple years later, seeing the Misfits at Clutch Cargo's. And just absolutely just being like a walking zombie at school. And that's how I've been today. But I mean, it was easily the most incredible concert I've ever been to. It was just unbelievable getting to see my favorite artist, Brandon Lake, on top of getting to worship with 13,000 people. It was amazing. If you want to see, you can go to my Twitter, you can go to my Instagram. I've got some videos up of that. All right, let's get back to the Michigan of it all. Shout out, by the way, to Carrie and Mike Lake, who I did run into. Mike Lay, who I ran into there at the show. Let's get back to the position groups. Let's go wide receiver next. This is a position group where, weirdly, I think you're going to see every single guy I'm going to mention. And this is where I'm a little bit more unsure because fall camp's going to tell you a lot that we haven't seen necessarily in spring. Some of it's obviously dependent on the quarterback, but the guys who you would think are going to start, Tyler Morris, Frederick Moore, and Samaj Morgan, I would not be surprised if any of those are relegated to reserve roles. I remember seeing in my comments recently with someone saying, I think it was on Instagram, that CJ Charleston likely won't play. He's the most experienced wide receiver they have, right? Like, I understand he played at Youngstown State. That's a lower level. He did well when playing against MSU, Ohio State, and some of those. So don't be surprised if you see a heavy dose. Now, last time it kind of felt that way, maybe, and this is why I'm not as bullish on him as I was one of the previous transfer wide receivers, which was Dalen Baldwin. I had Dalen as being the guy who was going to finish with the most yards. Didn't really work out for Dalen that well, but I think that it's going to be a much better path for CJ Charleston. We already talked about Kendrick Bell as being my inflection player, as well as Amorian Walker. He's right there. And it's not like Amorian Walker is like brand new to this. Even though he transfers in, like he only just missed a semester. He did cross-train at wide receiver before going full-time to defensive back. Like he was all in the wide receiver room, then cross-trained, I believe, up through spring, maybe even a little bit in fall, and then ended up being a full-time defensive back after that. I think with their length and everything, when I'm talking about Kendrick Bell and Amorian Walker, I could see them supplanting either Samaj or Frederick Moore if either of them are on the outside. Samaj is going to have his role. Frederick Moore is going to have his role, but I wouldn't be surprised with them. Peyton O'Leary is interesting, right? Walk-on, former walk-on. Don't know if he's on scholarship or not because those things tend to change on a year-to-year basis. But got all the camp hype last 2 years, and we really haven't seen much of him in games, so I kind of am reserved about what he's going to do. And the freshman, you can always see a freshman breaking in, but more often than not, receivers don't tend to you can have first-year players. Certainly in Ohio, they're going to have Jeremiah Smith is certainly going to be a big part of their plan. I usually say don't count on freshman receivers. Every time that I say, hey, you can count on this guy, this freshman receiver, it almost never works out that way. So when it comes to Channing Goodwin, Amarian Stewart, I'm not really counting on them that much. Offensive line. We know 3 starters for sure at this point. Miles Hinton, Josh Preeb, Giovanni El-Hadi. Center position is technically between 2 players, although it is a little bit bigger, obviously, because Jake Warnera will have an opportunity to battle with Greg Crippen and Raheem Anderson. I have Greg Crippen winning that battle. And then right tackle, I still like Andrew Gentry against Jeff Percy. But I mentioned Giovanni El-Hadi as the right guard. I think I did. But it's, as Kirk Campbell said earlier in the week, they've got 7 guys, so you would assume that it's everyone I mentioned outside of the freshmen. And then they want 8 or 9 because they need a rotation, because we've seen in previous years that they need to have a bit more depth, because there's times where they'll either add an extra lineman, and I think that they'll be able to do that fine, no matter whether it's Gentry or Percy that wins the job, or if they just want to they need some depth because of injuries and stuff like that. That's where I have a big question mark, because I don't think any of the freshmen, Blake Frazier, Andrew Sprague, Guarnera, who I mentioned, Ben Roebuck, Luke Hamilton, even though some of them have seen some pretty big body composition changes from when they were in high school to now, don't count on any of them. So really we're looking at Evan Link, Nathan Afobe, and Dominic Giudice, who actually I didn't mention in my article, who's one that Sherrod Moore shouted out. So he's in that mix as well. So it'll just be interesting to see how, and Connor Jones and Tristan Bounds as well. It'll be interesting to see what they're able to do as far as kind of building out that depth. Afobe and Link, I think, are my kind of odd-on favorites to be those guys. I'd love to see my guy Tristan really step up there, but it's hard to really say. But if I were to predict right now, and I've predicted this before, left to right, it would go Hinton, Preeb, Crippen, El Hadi, Gentry. And then I think Percy and Raheem Anderson will be in there, and we'll see how the rest of that shakes out. So that is the entirety of the offense. Let's move on to defense, edge rusher. There is a lot to kind of get to there. You know who your starters are. They played some key moments last year, even though they were both reserves, Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart. We already know TJ Guy is that third guy. And then after that, it's a question of, is Eno Etta, is he going to play inside or outside? I cross-listed him at both defensive line and edge rusher. Cameron Brandt is someone who could really work their way in. A name that I want to hear coming out of fall camp is Keyshawn Bennett. Dude's a former 4-star. He has that look, right? Like him and Walk-On Chibi Anwana. It's like, you guys look like NFL defensive ends. Like, come on, get it together. But outside of that, it starts to get a little murky. You've got some younger players. Dominic Nichols has gotten a couple mentions from Sherrod Moore this offseason. He's a true freshman, early enrollee guy. So I'd be really curious to see what he is able to do. And also Lugard Edekpai, he just kind of has that feel of that type of guy. So there are options, but you kind of know who the top of the rotation is. Defensive tackle, it's kind of similar, right? You know who your starters are: Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Rayshawn Benny, now healthy after breaking his leg. He'll be the third guy. Etta is going to rotate in there. So who's after that? That's where there's some questions. Brooks Barr gained a ton of weight, and he already is just an absolute monster if you see him in person. Not only have I seen him in person at Michigan events, but I didn't even talk to him, but I saw him at dinner the night before the national championship game. And it's like, this guy is just a monster in the making. Trey Pierce, even he's bulked up to 315. He has that same look. I know that they had some good things to say about him in spring, but we haven't really seen it yet. Those would be the guys that I would say are going to be in contention. Linebacker. Let's see, where are we at on top? Let's do linebacker. Let's do all the back end here on the other side. So we'll get to them here in just a moment. Before we do, I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but playoffs are done with the winter sports, the winter to summer sports as they go, and we get fewer games. The sports just are not sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets any time that I am in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus, and they're doing it daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. See, I found my rhythm. I started talking and I was like, I'm just going to keep going. Then I looked at the clock and I'm like, maybe let's just back off for a quick second here. Anyway, so Yeah, there's still quite a few defensive groups we have to get to. The whole back seven. Let's get to linebacker. We, again, know the starters, Ernest Hausman and Jayshawn Barham. That could be the best linebacker duo in the Big Ten. People aren't really talking about that. And here's the thing. You have great linebacker play. That's something that Steve Lorenz pointed out back when I was at 24/7 Sports. Said, Michigan has had good linebacker play, but they haven't had, above, up to the elite level. And you need elite linebacker play to win a national championship. Guess what Michigan had last year? Elite linebacker play. And I think that, honestly, the ceiling for both Ernest Hausman and Jayshawn Barham, each of them independent of each other, is higher than that of any of the guys that they were, obviously Hausman was a part of that, but I think they're higher than Colson and Mike Barrett, as good as they were. So it's up to them to be able to do that. But we know they're the entrenched starters in one way or the other. So they're the guys I have penciled in. Jaden Hood, Jimmy Rolder, and Micah Pollard are likely your guys that are coming in rotation. I would not be surprised if Cole Sullivan kind of usurps Pollard there. The true freshman, early enrollee guy. I just think that maybe it's just because he makes big plays for me on EA's College Football 25. But I feel like Sullivan is going to be that type of guy where it's kind of like Devin Bush in year one, where it's like they're just inserting him here and there, and it works, right? The room is very thin, unfortunately. So that's kind of the bulk of it, right? There's not a lot, especially if they're moving Mason Curtis, the defensive back. They already lost all kinds of guys. That starts to feel a little thin, but I think that's still a really good rotation, and they're in good hands there. All right, I said before, we have one position group that is deeper than any other, and that's safety. Every single person that I name now, I think you're going to see play a lot of minutes, -1 because of injury, and that's Rodmore. So let's get him out of the way. I think you'll see him eventually, and when you do, I think it'll be a backup role because others will have had more time on task, obviously. Maybe it'll be like starter type snaps by Ohio State, but it all depends on when he comes back, right? If he comes back week 11, probably not. Comes back week 6, then maybe that's he could be a starter by the end of the year. But Makari Page is your number one obvious starter because he's been doing it for 25 years now. And then beyond him, Jaden Mangum, Wes Walker, Quentin Johnson, Brandon Hillman, Zeke Berry, who I think is your starting nickel. And so we'll just take him out of the equation. You're going to see all those guys, though. Like Wes Walker and Jaden Mangum started at Tennessee and Michigan State, respectively. And now they're kind of duking it out to see who's going to be that other guy. And then Quentin Johnson comes back for year number 6. And, he made key plays against Ohio State in the college football playoff. So you're going to see all of these guys. So then the question is how does that rotation go? That's where it becomes increasingly difficult because it's like, Brandon Hillman, we thought was going to be the starter after Rod Moore got injured when you thought that Quentin Johnson was gone. And you felt like, okay, well, it's next man up. It's his time. It's year 2. Okay, let's go. And now he's like at the bottom of the barrel there. Like also kind of like, yeah, I know that they brought in the transfers and all, but it was like Keon Sabb, he would have probably been the starter too if Rod Moore was gone. But it's just like an embarrassment of riches at the safety position. It's amazing how well Jay Harbaugh recruited that position group last couple of years and all of that. And Chris Partridge as well, being a part of that kind of more early on, I believe. Anyway, so that's that. So I think it's going to be Makari Page and Jaden Mangum to start out. You're going to see all these guys in rotation. And I think that's where, it's just, where do you pick? And if your corners aren't, just absolutely up to snuff, maybe you just put more safeties out there. I don't know how you would do that, but it's like you've got so many guys. How do you play them all? Cornerback to finish out the main units. Will Johnson, obviously, best corner in the country. You can argue him and Travis Hunter. It's Will Johnson in my eyes, but I'm biased covering Michigan, having known Will since he was like a freshman in high school. But him on one side, and then you got a list of contenders, some who you would hope that you start hearing their names called a little bit more. And Jair Hill is one of them. Cody Jones, Miles Pollard, like those two guys, really hope that you start hearing their names called a lot more. You got the two freshmen, Josiah Edmond and Jeremiah Lowe. I would venture to guess that those guys redshirt. And then also you've got the transfers in Amir Hall from Albany and Ricky Johnson from UNLV. What I think is going to end up happening is I think, Will's obviously going to start one spot. I think it's going to be Jair Hill. I think the time on task really helps him being in the defense already. And Sharon Moore said some really good things about him at Big Ten Media Days. And I think that you're going to see Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson be the primary backups. Unless Pollard and Cody Jones take that step up. They need to, man. I remember talking to Cody Jones at the Rose Bowl, and he's like, yeah, I no thought of transferring, just been biding my time. Well, it's like, well, okay, well, you got to step things up. You got to get into that rotation. He kind of looks more like a safety to me, so I'm kind of surprised he's staying at corner. Keyshawn Harris is another one I didn't mention. I mean, he started games in the past. Would not surprise me if he, the former walk-on, ends up also being in the mix there. So they have some guys, but the task is much harder this year because they're going to see a lot more high-end passing offenses. Texas, Fresno State, Arkansas State, all kind of higher-end passing offenses. USC, Oregon, Washington. I mean, it's you got to get it right, and that's where maybe the rotation can be really good as well. But that's that. Yeah, your kicker, your punter, all that stuff is. Dominic Zavada, I think, is going to win over Adam Samaha. Tommy Domans, what competition does he really have as he goes into his second year as the starter? Long snappers, William Wagner, Greg Tarr sitting right behind him if he gets injured. Kick returners, wouldn't be surprised to see Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan reprise their roles, and they'll find some other fast guys. Wouldn't be surprised if it was like a Jair Hill type or a Morian Walker or someone like that end up getting that nod as well. So it all depends on, it's not just speed out there and stuff. It's being able to track the ball, catch the ball, make the right decision, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot harder than you think. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. We got our 5 in this week, second consecutive week. It is incredible because we are in season mode once again. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. On Monday, we will get to, we've got some player press conference stuff coming on Sunday. So we will talk about takeaways from that on Monday and whatever other news hits. So we will talk to you then. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Peace.